volume a bit and bring this back here. And let's play our disclaimer.
Thank you.
No problem.
Disclaimer. The information and education material contained herein is meant to promote the general understanding and dialogue of GANs processing. Such information is not meant or intended to serve as a substitute for a healthcare professional's clinical training, experience, or judgment. For patients and individuals, such information is not to be a substitute for professional medical, therapeutic, or healthcare advice or counseling. For medical issues or concerns, including decisions about medications and other treatments, readers, viewers, listeners should always consult their physician or, in serious cases, seek immediate assistance from emergency personnel. Prescription information, procedures, and use of medical devices information should be undertaken only by properly trained and certified medical personnel. We specifically disclaim any warranties, express or implied, including implied warranties of merchantability or fitness for a particular purpose. Such information is provided, as is, and is believed to be accurate at the time of its publishing, but it is the viewer's job to evaluate the accuracy of any information found in this presentation. Every case presented is of their own experience, applied by themselves for themselves, and it applies to their case only. Every person experiencing health problems should seek professional medical advice and consult their course of treatment with a doctor. The processes of plasma balancing described herein are a natural process which supports the body but does not replace medical advice or therapies one is already subject to.
Okay, and now help me welcome in on the plasma level, Alex, and I think he's prepared something special in the field dimension, perhaps, or again, I don't exactly know what he's put together, but we thank him and welcome to share as much as he'd like and finish the meeting for us. So thank you, Alex, for your continued dedication, your promptness, and always being there to serve the others. So welcome. We all welcome you.
Thank you very much, Mark, and thank you for leading us here. We really need that kind of leadership. And I want to welcome everybody here to the North American teachings, and to understand that it's beyond the continent. It includes all the continents around the planet, which is what makes this meeting so very strong. And I want to welcome you all on this beautiful Sunday afternoon as we continue to discuss the teachings of Marin Tavakolikesh and how it affects us all. Because this is the Kesh Foundation's Patient Institute teachings on plasma science. We are reviewing today previous classes from the Advanced Understanding series. And my name is Alexander. I am from Canada. It is August the 13th, 2023. And this is the Kesh Foundation North America Plasma Education series. And all of us are proud of our countries. And we're all patriots. And what does that mean? So we not only care for our country, but we care for our community. And our families are part of that community, and our community is part of that family. And these are the lessons that we have to learn. We are already in the second year of the new space age, and we're all pioneers in this. And so the big breakthrough, of course, was that we decided to finally bring this technology to the foreground. We started June the 6th of 2022. That's not when we started, that's just when we made the choice to bring the outer space and the earth space together and to merge with our inner space and to have a better understanding of what that is all about. And so we have started on December the 16th on activities that have to do with the fields of the souls. And so August is continuing. And what is different is that the fields of the souls and the physicality are individual sessions. And there's a purpose for this, because we are not just trying to elevate our souls, but there's a sequence. And so we have this capability, but do we have the awareness? And now that we have the awareness, do we have the understanding? And we're only talking about the understanding today, but in the 497th Knowledge Seeker Workshop, Mr. Kesh revealed a breakthrough in plasma science. Is this a breakthrough for the universe? Is this a breakthrough for God, the creator, or is this a breakthrough for us? And so these are questions. And many of us never knew that our being consisted of the soul of the man, the soul of the physicality, and the physicality. And these sessions will be run individually. So we will have a chance to see the graphs, the interaction of all three entities. Keshe Foundation is using the technology to bring us back into balance and to show that their existence and how they're behaving within you and how they interact emotionally in your life. And so these are the dimensions that we need to be aware of. Because at the root of this all is world peace. And so all of us are patriots and all of us are loyal to our country. But as we've seen from 286 sessions, the one nation, one planet, one race for world peace, we are the home of the superconducting souls. And this is not a recent phenomenon. We've been working at this thing for an extremely long time. And so many people are discovering things that they never knew before, and they're quite excited about these discoveries. And so they should be, because when we look at book number 1, we're talking about the universal order of creation. Have you ever had this conversation in a coffee shop? Or how about book number 2, the structure of the light? Or book number 3, the origin of the universe? And these are deep conversations. Before you have a conversation with someone else, you have to have that conversation with yourself. And so that's what we're doing. We're going through not only to teach others, but to teach ourselves. Because when we learn, then we can assume the position of being a teacher. But the learning never stops. And just as we have new teachers, we also have new students. And these new students will become new teachers. And so our dilemma is, how do we condense all this? And so we try to condense it into these classes. But now we have to condense it further into the review of these classes. So we'll start the review of the advanced understanding. And remember, advanced is advanced. There's a difference between advanced and basic. We'll start with stacker units. And so as we go down the plasma highway, we're looking for outer space. But what it is really is our embodiment of our little piece of pie in the sky. And how does this work? And how does this compare to our existing knowledge? And so when we look at the origin of the universe, we see something very different. We see where the origin of the universe creates other universes. And one of those universes is our universe. But our universe is limited to that little tiny red dot in the bottom right-hand corner. And, you know, when you need something, then you create it. And the reason you create it is because you need it. And why do you need it? Well, because you don't have it. And so that's one of the situations that we have on this planet. We don't have food, so we need it. We have guns, we need to sell them. So we need wars. So we create wars. We need intelligence, so we create artificial intelligence. This is just the way we operate. Wholly oblivious to the fact that we have a sister universe that is wondering what the hell is going on. And how does that relate to the ray creation? So when we look at the Keshe model of nuclear decay, and that's an unfortunate word, because it's a decay in the energy state. And so this decay is referring to something very specific. So it isn't the decay of creation. The decay of creation is destruction, but destruction is just another form of creation. And for those with limited intelligence, that's what they do. But nuclear decay creates something. And so we see the neutron create an atom. And that atom, just like our universe and our sister universe, has an electron-proton marriage, which collectively is an atom. But in the process, there's a byproduct. And it's not garbage. It's the release of PM ticks. That's part of the decay process. So let's not confuse the creation with garbage. We're trying to define plasma. We have to understand that plasma is energy, and it's a kind of energy. So when we say kind of energy, that means there are different kinds of energies and different kinds of energy states. And so our point of view determines this, and it affects our understanding. And our understanding is very important for us to understand our earth space. And we have to use this to find our inner space. It's when we understand our inner space, then our search for outer space will be complete. And it's pretty important, because life is important. And if important is not important, then nothing is important, really. Although some people choose to debate that, because energy binding for the purposes of self-serving is important. It's part of creation. But that creation isn't at the expense of others. That's the way we operate here. And the reason for that is because we have adopted a disconnect between the soul of the man and the soul of the body. So we can maintain our existence, but we can't maintain our morality. And how do we know that? And that is because the soul of man will never kill another. So what is allowing the unallowable to happen? And what the unallowable does, it prevents the flowing of energy. What is allowable, really, is the self-serving at the enhancement of others, because the others are also part of not only you, your family, and your community, but your country, your earth, and the universe. And we just have to figure out which schemes are we concerned with. And it all starts with basically energy and motion, which we see is either negative or positive. And that doesn't imply whether it's positive or negative, that implies the direction. And that direction, based on the surface to volume ratios, shows you that the negative charge is the giver. And the higher the ratio, the higher the negative charge. And so when you can give more, you can also take more. So the question then becomes is what do you give and what do you take? And when does the taking become the giving and the giving become the taking? And so it's a duality. The energy can be flowing or can be binding. So what's the relationship? We have to look at the principal interaction. We see that energy is always in motion and is always in a two-way street. So if you're self-centered and self-focused, well, that's the binding of energy. And that's important because no one can look after you as well as you can. But we have to coexist. And so that energy has to be exchanged with something. And to see that exchange is not to relinquish the binding, but to enhance the binding. So the binding and the flowing are working together. And so there's a flow from the binding to the flowing. And then there's a flow from the flowing to the binding. It's cooperation. It's a two-way street. And it's ongoing all the time. And it follows rules. And those rules, we call them the plasma rules because the energy states increase by at least an order of magnitude. So we all like to get more, but once you get into a scale of 10 times more, that's pretty significant. But the thing is that as we want to get more, we find that the higher energy states feed the lower energy states. And so this becomes the glaring problem. Those who don't want to feed the lower states and increase their energy state. It defies, we don't have to go into any more rules. That's it. It's done. If you want to increase the energy state by an order of magnitude, then the higher energy state must feed the lower state. And if it doesn't, then forget about the energy state increase. And forget about, whether they manifest through creation or natural decay. And don't even worry about it being non-consuming because he's not following the rules. And I didn't write the rules. And neither did you. And then there's another benefit, and that is in the transfer rates, we can transfer by many orders of magnitude as well in the higher energy states. So this is the bonus. So we increase the state, we increase the energy by an order of magnitude. And the higher we go, the change also increases by orders of magnitude. So now we know why the universe is squared and plasma is bound to the ethos of the universe. That's another dimension. When does that happen? And so we're back to the creation of the universe. How is the universe created? So it exists from energy, but energy is always in motion. You just can't grab onto it. So you have to kind of give it a racetrack to follow. And so when we look at the cover of book number 1, and we see the rotating field, but it's not just that, there are interactions within that field. And so the energy is going both ways. And because it's going both ways, then energy has a charge, because that charge reflects the motion. And so if there is a motion, it has to be between two fields. And so all things are in combination. And so we have to understand that there's a combination possible on one energy level, but there's a combination possible between energy levels. And we know that because the energy from the sun comes to the earth and it goes through the vacuum. But if the energy is going through this vacuum, how does it do that? So there has to be a connection. And so we find that our understanding of the vacuum is totally upside down because it doesn't look like there's anything there, but obviously it's full of principal matter. And this principal matter is energy. And it's the plasma field transaction currency. It's the plasma fuel. And how do we get this? Well, that depends on susceptibility. So what does that mean? Well, when we decide what something is, we have to see what it isn't. And so something is something as opposed to it being something else. But something is always something. Nothing is nothing. There is no such thing as nothing. There's only a plasma interaction. And so we are understanding an infinity loop where all things are working in combination. But do we understand that there's a magnetical pushing and a gravitational pulling, and that the balance of the magnetical gravitational field forces is what we call a mag-grav condition? And so that becomes balanced. And so when we look at the periodic table of elements, is this the garbage from the universe? Or is this the manifestation of the interaction of the plasma fields? And if it's all balanced, then how come we have so many different elements in the periodic table of elements? And isn't it interesting that iron is right in the middle of this thing? And the iron is essential because it's a component of our blood, and it's a component of the earth. And there's a connection there as well. And then there's other elements like copper and zinc, which affect our physicality and our emotional strength. And then there's other elements like magnesium and calcium, which give us a substance, but also give us a connection. And so what we've done here is we've moved the columns from the left over to the right so that we can create this smaller picture where you can see the key components, the copper and the zinc and the magnesium and the calcium. But then you see the chlorine and the sodium, which they're individual on the periodic table of elements, but in combination, they're salt. And the hydrogen, carbon, nitrogen, and oxygen are also individual, but the combination are amino acids. And so we see that there's a functionality. And so where is that functionality functional? And can we all be plasma scientists? Well, we had to during the pandemic. We made the cups of life, and remember that these weren't the cups of the pandemic. They enhanced our emotional strength, which came from that inner space. And we had in it physical things like the zinc plate, nano-coated copper coil, and the copper coil. And we hooked it up with wires. But what we were looking for was that magnetic field and the gravitational field. And then we found a difference between the emotional cup and the physical cup by changing some of the elements. And so we see that the physical cup was the magnetical giver, and the emotion was the gravitational taker. Well, how can the emotional cup be gravitational? Because it's the higher strength. The higher strength feeds the weaker. So shouldn't it be the gravitational giver? Well, now we understand how the cups of man are working because it's a two-way street. So the relationship of the giving and taking is all based on your point of view. And collectively, there's a magnetical gravitational field force with a core strength. And so We don't look at it individually, we look at the total picture. And interestingly enough, when we remove all the components and we find that there was a field working inside, and it was very artistic. And so we see the residue here of what was going on inside the cups. Here we are looking from the top down, and we see the crystalline formation that is a manifestation of the field forces within the plasma cup. And here we see the dynamic reaction and how it grows. And we can see that the gas is forming a ring, but it's in the water. And you can't do that with a swizzle stick. And when we look top down, you can see how the gas perfectly aligns with the physical constraints of the glass. And we can see right through the water. We can see right through the glass. And we can see right through to the table underneath. That's amazing. It's as if nothing is there. But what is there is this rotating field. And it's not only just a rotating field, but it's rotating as a spiral in, and it's rotating as a spiral out simultaneously. And there is a core field strength, which is either giving or taking, depending on your point of view. And so we're talking about the principal matter of the PMTICs, which are basically an energy pack and are converging together in a force field interaction, which we call a combination of antimatter, dark matter, and matter. So this combination is a Maggrav condition, but a Maggrav condition is in balance. And when it's in balance, it's not visible. But what we see is that that field goes beyond the edge of the Maggrav. And we know that because each of us has many ideas floating through our heads, and we can share these ideas. And we don't get hurt physically when we do this in a natural way. It comes from the core component. So the idea as an electron is shared magnetically, but the creation as a neutron is maintained gravitationally. And so when you look at the core component, they look the same. But can you see the difference? And there is a difference. And this is what we have to understand. The difference is, as we look at the magnetical field forces and how do they differ from magnetic field forces. So if we're looking at magnets and we see their relationship in the top half of the picture, depending on the polarity, there's a space gap, which we call repulsion. But if we change the polarity, then that space gap disappears. We call that attraction. And speaking of disappearing, if we remove the magnets and replace the magnets with plasma fields, we find that the magnetical field forces remain. And they have the same characteristics of repulsion and attraction. And we know that because we've seen that in the cups of life. So how can you see something which you can't see? Well, you can't see the field forces between these two magnets, but you can see that they're pretty well attracted to each other. And you can't see the polarity, but you know that you're looking at opposite poles. You don't know which one is which, though, but it doesn't matter. As long as they're opposite, you have a relationship. And you know that's an attraction there because we pinch this towel in between the two. But what happens if we flip one? But we don't have to do anything else. They will simply repel themselves. And so there's a gap now in between. So we didn't create the gap. All we did was we flipped one magnet. So we have to understand that when we have a relationship and we're trying to build something, you have one point, you add a second point, and then you make the connection. Is it repulsion or is it attraction? Or is it a kind of repulsion or a kind of attraction? Because it's not absolute. Because the balance point is a balance between the force field of the attraction and the repulsion. Because if you didn't have the balance, then the attraction would go all the way to the point where the two magnets would come together. But if it has an attraction, but there's a gap, then that gap has to be created by the repulsion. Now, if there wasn't attraction, then that repulsion would keep on going, wouldn't it? So you never get a balance. You have to have both. And so then we understand that we look at the rotating fields of the Earth, and we find that if there's its two same poles, that there's repulsion, then we know that we have to flip a pole so that there's attraction. And that's why we have a North Pole and a South Pole. And we have two rotating hemispheres. And that's what happens in the plasmatic reality. But in the physical reality, the sun comes up in the morning and sets in the evening. And this is important for us because when we look at our cups of life, which includes the emotion, the physicality, and our soul, we have to understand that our relationship with the Earth also matters. And not only do we have our soul, do we have the Earth soul, but we have a combination of the two. And that combination is called the inertia. This is another consideration. So when we look at the total package, we see the 5 cups interaction, and we see them individually, but we have to look at collectively that there's a magnetical gravitational relationship, and there's a soul of the collective that operates as well. It doesn't negate the operation of the individual cups, but there's a collective operation. And so that becomes part of the stacker system, the 5-cup system. And where we see that we can just, by changing the components, by changing the elements, we can change the outcome. And when we look at the relationships, and we say, well, there's a cup of soul, cup of emotion, cup of the physicality, and then the cup of the inertia, of course, is, from our point of view, the interaction with the Earth. And then we find that there's a feeding, and the higher strength feeds the lower strength, but not exclusively, and not individually. And lower field strengths also feed to further lower field strengths. Not individually, not exclusively, but simultaneously. And so at the lowest level, you get fed from all of the levels above. And that's an ongoing process. And as a result, there's an interaction. And that interaction is the cup of inertia. Is everything taken into account here, or is there more? And so when we look at the periodic table of elements, we find that those elements are all part of this Earth. And so when we look at the feeding cups and we understand that we only included maybe 6 elements in there, and then we look at the feeding units and we find that they have over 400 elements in there, we start to understand that, you know, as we expand our schemes, we can do more and we can be more. We're only at the point now where we're aware that we can do this. And we've imposed some limitations. And so our limitation is understanding that in our Earth space, we now can see that we can transcend the various energy states. And when I say we can see it, we can't see the plasma states. We can only see the residue of the plasma states. And when we're focusing on the lowest energy state, heat and electricity. And you wonder why that's obsolete. And the next energy level is the nuclear physics. And we're at the point where that's obsolete. And now we're in the plasma physics. And the way we understand the plasma physics, even that's obsolete. Because we've gone through a different kind of transformation, a different understanding of what is basic transportation, and understand that there's more, because there's different matters. There's the physical matter, the plasmatic matter. And in order to understand it, we have to understand that we can sense it. We have to be able to sense it to understand the difference. And so we have to go through this change and understand that when we're talking about transportation, we're talking about small land matter state, the physical. And when we're talking about the transformation, we're talking about the capital M matter state, plasmatic. And we have to understand the difference. And our souls do understand the difference. And we understand this every night when we go to sleep. Because we leave our physicality behind and we travel. And now we know that we can travel in many places. And it all depends. It all depends on our understanding of how things operate. And we come back in the morning. Come back where we left. And yet we have no faith in the universe. Strange. And so our point of view is earthbound. Well, we have to understand that our point of view is from our soul. And our soul is the highest energy state, so that's gravitational. And the physical is the lowest energy state, so that is magnetical. And we have to understand that the earth is gravitational. And so this is why we are firmly walking on the ground. But we have skills to learn. And so that all depends on our point of view. So the reality is the reality manifestation. So when the two fields come together, they form another, and that field is the manifestation. And it's this plasma feeding that leads to this manifestation. So we understand that that can be either non-tangible or tangible, non-visible or visible. And so there's a plasmatic reality and a physical reality. And any reality is a form artifact. So that manifestation is the form artifact. But we all understand the emotion of presence. And so the emotion of presence is a form artifact of energy and motion as well. And so we see how relationships are developed And we see how there's a limitation. So when we look at the magnetical-gravitational relationship, and we say, well, we're bonded in balance, which we call a maggrav, we see that we can't see it. It's invisible. And it's not normal. Because energy is always in motion. So to try and quantify it scientifically is impossible. And to try and corral it spiritually is impossible. But what you can do is bring the two together as a plasma science and add to that knowledge. Just like the Earth and its two rotating hemispheres. And what knowledge is it adding? Well, obviously, there's an Earth knowledge, there's an elemental knowledge, and there's also RNA and DNA knowledge. And doesn't matter if you're in the northern hemisphere or the southern hemisphere. We'll walk on the Earth. You're never upside down. There's no such thing as upside down in outer space. There's only a relationship. Magnetical gravitational relationships. What is this yellow submarine? Why was it such a pivotal point in our generation? Because we all live in this yellow submarine. And we still live in this yellow submarine. It's been a long time. And so, for those of you who don't know, there was a major event in Toronto in 1969. Long time ago. And it was called Live Peace. And we were imagining peace. And John Lennon was obviously a member of that famous band called the Beatles. And he wanted to give peace a chance. Did we even know that peace needed a chance? And so we learned something about transcendence. Did we even understand what transcendence meant? We even heard the song, we all live in the yellow submarine. Yellow submarine, yeah, yellow submarine. The yellow submarine was in the sea of green. Well, what does that mean? And so when we talked about light, and we talked about the colors, and we talked about the relationship of wavelengths and frequencies, wavelength, the length of the wave, and the frequency, and how it relates to light, the speed of light, which is constant. And yet we can move through this. And the direction that we're moving with the yellow submarine in the sea of green is we're moving to a higher frequency. But we're still in the yellow submarine. Because we're heading in uncharted waters. Well, are they uncharted? Or is it our impression that it's uncharted? You know, it's like, what about Christopher Columbus when he came to America? That was uncharted, or was it? And as he said, Captain Columbus, I think we discovered India. Well, did Christopher Columbus discover India? Or did Christopher Columbus discover America? What about the people that were there? What did they discover? And so we have, our Tavistock friends, courtesy of Timothy Leary, saying, tune in, turn on, and drop out. I understand that he was not an original thinker, but he was an advertising agent for Loosh harvesting. And Loosh follows the law of detachment through a misunderstanding, promoting fear and greed, promoting ego validation, causing us all to leak of our energy. And as part of a physical feeding system we call Loosh harvesting, well, we didn't understand that in order to preserve the Loosh and not to leak, we had to remain detached and at ease. That's the law of detachment. So that we could soar past the eagle and be free. As Carlos Castaneda would say. Did he really understand what he was doing? Or was he another misguided soul? And so when we look at the soul food, which is what we really need, the truth is what it meant was to tune into the message from your soul. Turn on to the energy from the universe and drop out and fall into the soul of your body. And to understand that you have to get it in before you get it out. Because you receive from the pattern that you provide. And if you tell the universe to shut up, then you will go hungry. And that's the message from the nowhere man. And so, yes, John Lennon sang a song called Imagine. And the words said that imagine there's no heaven. It's easy if you try. No hell below us. Above us only sky. Imagine all the people living for today. Imagine there's no countries. It isn't hard to do. Nothing to kill or die for, and no religion too. Imagine all the people living life in peace. Imagine no possessions. I wonder if you can. No need for greed or hunger. Just a brotherhood of man. Imagine all the people sharing all the world. You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I hope someday you'll join us. And the world will live as one. Sung by John Lennon. Words by the noble man. What's the connection? There's a Gansett connection. We are reviewing advanced understanding. So we have to look at the fundamental principle of the twinity, where the speed of rotation of the large twin plasma of the proton is interacting with the small plasma of the electron, because the two together work together to create the atom. And yet, when we look at the rest of the universe, which is a lot bigger than the atom, isn't it? And we say, well, something's missing here. And so what we're talking about is the principal universal line mass. And you see that there is a central principal zone, from which everything radiates. And as it radiates and you go from one side to the other, imagine a sweep. It's a point sweep. Put yourself in the center, grab onto the left and swing it on to the right. And so what you find is you've created the rotating field. But that's only half the picture, isn't it? And that's why we have these flying saucers, because they're only half the picture. They're not created like the Earth, which is two halves together. So when we look at the universe, it's two halves together. But there are points within the universe where the energies come together. And when they come together, they create this rotating field. So we see the creation and we see the result of the creation. And something is always something as opposed to something else. And so the energy somehow goes from one to another. And if we understand the capillary effect, which is when you have two bodies of water and you create this siphon bridge, and this siphon bridge can be a tube where you can siphon the water from one to the other, and you will find that that water will move. Why will it move? Well, because there's an inflow and there's an outflow. And you will find that you can increase the number of elements and make the connection, right? And as long as there's this inflow and there's an outflow, this connection will keep moving in a daisy chain. And we call this cascading. And you can make this daisy chain as long as you want. And it will still work as long as you have an inflow and an outflow. Which one is giving and which one is taking? So you have to realize that in order for the outflow to be able to give, it has to receive. But in order for the inflow to be able to give, the outflow has to flow out first. Because if the outflow is not flowing out, then the inflow will overflow. There's a sequence. And isn't it ironic that we call the center part of the periodic table of elements the transition metals? And what's at the center is the iron, which is common to the blood and to the earth. And so that point of convergence, call it the vanishing point. And the reason for it is because something is always something as opposed to something else. So when something comes to a certain point, then it's diminishing, isn't it? But as we drive down the road on a sunny day, you see far into the distance how the asphalt shines. And the reason is because of the angle. And so we find that the shining is actually a luster. And that luster is a flattening of the rotating field. And what happens when you flatten a field? Well, then you introduce what we call hairpin turns. So when we look at the principal universal line maps and we flatten the rotating field, we find that the ends become sharper. Well, how is it possible to navigate around that bend? And so remember, when two fields come together, they interact. They make a connection. And so what happens when you make that connection, when you have all these fields coming together and they converge? Doesn't make any sense. It's all just coming together for what? For what reason? And so you see that there's a convergence and there's a divergence. There's a gravitational, there's a magnetical, and there's an interaction when two forces come together. And they don't collide, but they deflect. And so we see that the field remains. But there are other forces that we have to take into account. So what happens when we have a field force that is contained by two other forces? And when we position these magnets and we said, oh, well, you know what, these magnets here, they are representing a connection. And that connection is a balance between the attraction and repulsion forces, which we can't see, but in this picture, there's something else going on here. And so let's release that. And so we find the fundamental principle of the twinity, where these two force fields are interacting, but there's a lot that's going on in between. And interestingly enough, when we put the water in the center, we find that the field forces are going around the water, and the water has a affinity to the GANs. And there's a connection called the GANs of connection. And that GANs of connection, when we take the water from the inside and move it to the outside, that GANs of connection remains. Because we found that we could take water that's acidic and put it within the field and convert it into alkaline water without electrolysis and without chemical supplementation. And so we find there's a relationship of the outside field to the inside field. And that's the same thing with our RNA, DNA. There's a plasmatic relationship between the RNA and DNA, and there's a physical relationship between the physical RNA and DNA. And the combination of these two creates an inertia field, this interaction point, which is part of what we call the infinity loop. And so we see that with the amino acids, we create the star formation. And so the energy converges and then the energy diverges, but there's a point in between. There's a point of conversion from the plasma state to the physical state. But it's a two-way street, isn't it? So there's a conversion from the physical state to the plasma state. And you know that you can do that because you made the cup of life. And so whatever you created was at the interaction point. We call that a conversion point, the field of inertia. And it goes perpendicular to the other two fields. But that's only in 2 dimensions. When you look at the cellular structure, you find that it goes in 3 dimensions. this convergence is in 3 dimensions. And so what we're looking at, a cell here with phospholipids. And it has within it the DNA and the RNA, but then it creates something else. What does it do? And how does it do it? So we have to better understand what it means by being monatomic. And so the difference is, of course, we have a copper wire, and that copper wire has the copper elements linked together. But when we nanocoat the copper wire, we have the copper elements, but they're not linked together. They stand individually, but they act together. So not only are they maintaining the relationships, like magnets would create a relationship, and not only do they have this magnetical gravitational balance, or what we call a balance between the repulsion and the attraction forces, but we have these gaps in between, and they also have an attraction and repulsion force. So when we have nanocoating on the copper, we have millions of magrevs. Each atom is monatomic. That means it's a single atom. It acts as a single atom to maintain its singularity, but it acts across the gap. So millions of magrevs act across millions of gaps. And the gaps and the magrevs interact and create millions of dynamic plasma reactors. Now we understand the nanotechnology and how it really works. And it works to our benefit, because not only do the layers create a base, but the layers themselves create a star formation. And then when we find a star formation, it interacts with another star formation. And that's how the energy flows. But the energy is synergistic. So you have multiple monatomic energy flows. And so we've known about superconductors for many generations. And superconductor works at room temperature. And one of the best superconductors, of course, is not only the amino acid, but the essential fatty acids that we have. They operate in an amino nanostate. So literally, we have been superconductors all our lives. We're just becoming aware of those capabilities and what it means. And so all the principles of the basic rules of plasma science are there. Where the higher strength feeds the weaker strength, and then we understand the direction of flow and how it has to keep flowing in order to maintain the force field. And so we find that water is a universal solvent, and it in itself is a magrev. Well, how is it possible for an oxygen, a big fat oxygen, to be in balance with 2 little tiny hydrogens? And so we find that there's the magic of this little energy parceling unit, which allows water to be essential for life and a key component. And so we see that in this field, what goes around comes around. And so what does that mean? Well, something is always something as opposed to something else. So from this rotating field, we can create a star formation. So obviously there are things that are happening that are causing this to happen, which you can't see. all you can see is the reality. You can see the form artifact of that reality. And you can't see the impetus that caused this form artifact, because that would be the emotion. But you can see that something has created you. And something has created you in the image of you. Can you accept that you created yourself? Can you accept that that was the intention? Can you accept that you had a brain or you have a heart and that it too was created? And when you look at the brain, it also has two hemispheres. Isn't that interesting? And then when you look at the cells and you see the phospholipids, which are like soldiers around the perimeter of a cell, and there's two rows, and they work together. And not only that, but there's an outside of the cell and an inside of the cell. And funny things happen. You have straight lines, and you have bent lines. And then there's bending and more bending. And in the process of bending, funny things happen. So we find that some essential acids are slightly alkaline and are essential for life. We call them omega-3, 6, and 9. But in that process, we create hydrogen and oxygen. So what happens in the universe when these things come together? And why do they keep coming together? And so we need to understand this monatomic daisy chain, where the individual components are making the connection, but there really is no attachment. There's a cascading of energy flow, energy flowing in and energy flowing out. And it only works if there's a pattern. And so we see that when we go from the physical elements of atoms, where they are linked together, to the monatomic structure of the nanoparticles, and then popcorn creation of the gas, and how it gets converted, and we see the relationship of the interacting fields and how they create things. And this all becomes not only the GANs of man, but the world of man. And it all has to do with dimensions. And you go from 2 dimensions, and you put a bend, and you create a 3rd dimension. But in that process, you create more. And so we created hydrogen and oxygen. And if we keep doing it, well, we create more. And we have a whole bunch of periodic, a whole bunch of elements on the periodic table of elements, and one of them being zinc. And we see what happens when then we put a bend in the zinc. And it's very soft, and you keep bending it, and it'll eventually break. Well, what happens when we do that to an energy field? What happens when we flatten out that field and it comes to that hairpin? What is the difference in going from the straight line to the hairpin bend? Because there's no accounting for it to happen, is there? Unless we open up that field. And so we find that the opening up of that field facilitates the navigation around the hairpin. And so by changing the relationship between the magnetical and gravitational force fields, we change the relationship of the manifestation. So we find the same thing happens in the universe. There's a connection. And so this is the gas of the connection, because it's a plasmatic field force. And so the plasmatic fields can be physical or non-physical. But somehow, some way, we have to navigate around that hairpin. Okay, well, we navigate around that hairpin, but what's on the other side of that hairpin? Or we're not going to worry about that right now, are we? We'll leave that to discuss later. What we have to discuss is that when we go around in this field, there's a difference between the inside and the outside, so they cannot be the same. The fields have to open up. There has to be a relationship to maintain this field. And so we find that we have 2 arms and 2 legs and a heart. We have to have a place for our brain, and that's in another field. And so we see how we're structured, how we go from this straight line, navigate around the hairpins, but we have to take other things into account. And so where we are is at the convergence point. And just like the Earth at its convergence point, is the energies coming together from the rotating hemispheres, creating that one point. But now we understand that there's also a gap, because there's a gap between the rotating hemispheres, isn't it? Otherwise, it'd be a grinding or breaking, in fact. Braking as in stepping on the brakes and impeding the rotation. So when we look at book number 1 in chapter 16 and look at the fundamental difference between inertia and gravity, you can see that the inertia is due to the total interaction of the PM ticks of the matter. And if we understand the structure of plasma, it is defined as the PM ticks and gravitational fields due to the capital M matter in the small m matter components of the plasma. You have to take both into account, because both are there. So the inertia of the plasma is the total collection of the PM ticks. And as such, is applicable to the dark matters, the antimatters, as well as the matter components, which we said is either capital M matter or small m matter components of the plasma in the universe. And so we see the relationship, the gravitational relationship as being inside the field, and the inertia being outside the field. But if it's outside of one, it's outside of the other. And if there's a connection, it has to be connected to the inside of the other. And so we see the infinity loop, and it maintains this balance. And yet we know that there are no 2 fields the same. So one loop has to be magnetical, one loop has to be gravitational. Because if both loops were either magnetical or both loops were either gravitational, they would not be connected. Something is always something, as opposed to being something else. So what is that something that keeps it together, and how does it stay together? So let's look at the currents of eddy. What keeps this neutron as the core component of the gravitational force field of its singularity? And how do we go from this neutron to this electron-proton combination and create this release of the PM ticks? And then how does the electron and the proton keep its combination? And so we look at the phenomenon of water, and it has the same condition as an energy parceling unit, where it's in a maggrav state with the two tiny hydrogens and a very big fat oxygen. They keep a balance. But the unique characteristic is that we can take one of these hydrogens and just shear it off, knock it off. And where does it go? I don't know. It all depends, doesn't it? But we know that it's in motion, so it's got to go somewhere. And at the same time, what's left behind is this hydroxyl. And it's still a marriage between a hydrogen and an oxygen, because it's still water, but it has a negative charge because it's missing that electron. And so it attracts something, and that's why it becomes a solvent. It is something as opposed to something else. And because it's a universal solvent, that something else could be something to make it dirty. And when it becomes dirty water, it loses its balance, doesn't it? It doesn't become as energy efficient. It doesn't, shall we say, make the energy flow. And in fact, it can become quite stagnant. And we know when it becomes stagnant, it can become quite stinky. But when it's in constant motion, there are always these waves. And so we have to understand what it means to have waves, and we'd like to get a picture of it. But we have to imagine that something else is going on. And that what's going on is the difference between American football, where you have control, you have stagnation, you always stop the action, or you have rugby, where the action keeps flowing. And that's what waves are. The action keeps flowing. And we are more than 75% water. Well, what kind of water is it? And is it always in a wave action? Are you getting seasick? Or are you feeding yourself? Are we using the wave motion of the water to enhance the feeding? But if the wave motion is physical, and we're talking about plasma water, which doesn't have a wave motion, then how does that work? And so let's look at this water molecule, and we see, in the physical form, if we say that the water is like a magnet, and we have a big fat oxygen in the middle, and we have these two hydrogens, and because of the same polarity, they repel, right? And they repel a certain distance, but they keep moving. And so when they move, there are other hydrogens in the water, and they move. And so the position changes, doesn't it? And the waves go in, and the waves go out, and the waves go in, and the waves go out. And so this positioning isn't static, it's flowing. And this is a key component of water. So when we look at the cells and we look at the phospholipids, and they're like soldiers, and when they're in balance like this, you can see that nothing much can happen. But we have to take something else into account. And we've already done that. There's an inside and an outside to the cells, right? But there's another thing. We have to take into account the earth. And not only. So when we're looking at the surface of the cells and the phospholipids, we have to understand that in order to maintain the force field of the cell, there is curvature, just like on the earth. And so if there is a curvature, then there's a change in the conformity of the fields that are converging. And we have to understand that the energy has to come in and go out. And so we have to have a difference. We have to have a magnetical gravitational relationship. And so if it's coming in, it's converging in, and if it's going out, it's diverging going out. Now, what we have to understand is two-way pathway. So when we look at the universe and we see how we navigate around the edges, what exactly are we diverging from or converging to? Well, let's not talk about that. Let's just talk about the relationships here on Earth. Let's look at maybe a relationship and say energy is flowing through a straw. And as we'll find, there are many examples of energy converging and diverging, as we see in music and a wonderful instrument called an accordion. Now we understand how scientific accordions really are. And in fact, we can have a syringe that's like an accordion. And so we have to understand that there's a gravitational and magnetical component there. So if we're acting on the accordion, that's the primary energy giver, the gravitational side. And whatever's happening on the magnetical side, depending on how we're squeezing the accordion, stuff is going to come in or stuff is going to go out. So just by using the syringe, you become a plasma scientist. And so what we're talking about is this magnetical attraction and repulsion. It's a relationship, right? Always a relationship. Now, if we have all of them in the same alignment as if they were soldiers, I think you can clearly see that, you know, if this is a line on American football, and this is a blocking line. And if you need to be going through that line, you need to be a little bit creative. And if you want to keep moving, you know, you've got to keep changing direction, don't you? You can't be static. And so we change our straight straws into curlicues. Or we can change the direction. And so we can have a second line. But if that second line is going in one direction and the other line is going in the other direction, they are both blocking lines. And then what happens when you snap the ball? You get friction. So you have two fields that come together and you have this friction. A lot of stuff is happening. And it's happening in different directions. So whatever's happening in between there is the interaction point. Right? So we see the action of the infinity loop, but not in one dimension, but in two dimensions. And so we have to understand that there's something happening in between. That if we don't maintain some kind of balance, then we're going to have a loss of organization. So if we put a rotating field in between, and if we follow the direction of the straws, we can find that there's a compatibility. The field only has to rotate in one direction, and both lines will be satisfied. And we know that because when a boat floats in the water, you see the eddy currents. And so the friction between the boat and the water is facilitated by the rotation of the eddy currents. Well, in the plasma, you also have a plasma friction when two fields rotate together. But the difference is you create a PM tick. And so we understand in space technology how we go from spheres to cylinders. We have two star formations. And if we open up and look inside, then we can see this magnetical gravitation relationship on both ends. But there's a convergence of two gravitational fields in the center. There has to be a way of maintaining the integrity of those magnetic fields. And so we have these eddy fields in the center that are unseen, that allow the crossover at this vanishing point. And so not only do you have an interaction point between the two fields, but you have the interaction between two hemispheres, plus the interaction with the DNA and the RNA, plus the plasmatic and the physical fields. And so what you get is cell division. And from cell division, you have cell multiplication. And so the unseen is this unseen field. It's like an eddy current. It's a facilitator, but it also is a binder. And so we have binding and we have flowing. But it's not just in two fields. It's in three dimensions. Because you can go in and you can go out. And you can go around. Complete transmutation. Now you're aware. So where does the cup of the universe come to play in all this? So we talk about the cups, the 5-stacker unit. These are all the cycle of life cups, aren't they? because they not only involve your soul, but they involve your emotion and your physicality and the environment, which we call the earth, and the relationship between you and the earth, the inertia field. And these are all part of life, and they're all interactions. So what you're seeing is not only the monatomic structures of the cups of light, but you're seeing the nano gaps between the cups of light. And then you have to understand that there's a rotating field in there, which is facilitating the binding and the flowing, and they all work together, not just as a stacker unit, where you have the vertical waves and the horizontal waves and how they work together, but the matter state of all life and all creation. And when we call that matter state, capital M matter state, it doesn't matter if it's plasmatic or if it's physical. The rules are the same. So when we look at the cup of the universe and we see how we create all these ganses, copper gans and zinc gans and calcium gans and iron gans, and how we put it all together. And we see the convergence, divergence, balance. But there's always this independent variable. Because we're all of the same common denominator, but we're all unique. So this becomes the problem when we have to understand this hemispheric interaction of what we call the bicameral brain, the two rooms. And so we've interpreted it as being not only two-faced, but two-fisted, two-timing, double dealing, and double crossing. That's not the way the universe works. There's an interaction of these fields, and this creates a gravitational component. And it interacts with a physical component and interacts with the emotion. And so when we ask, is the brain or the heart? Well, what it is a plasmatic interaction. And whether it's the brain or the heart, it creates a plasma field. And so if we look at the brain and how it individually is a plasma field, and from there, it creates this dynamic plasma. And then if we look and we see that the structure of the brain is beyond its boundary, it doesn't stop at the boundary. It's interacting with something else. And as it goes around the corners, around the hairpin turns, and is around the surface, in order to maintain that motion, it has to interact. And so we find that each end, whether it be the top of the head or the tips of the fingers or the tips of the toes, we have to navigate around that, and we have to interact with other things. So when we look at our physical destination state, yeah, that's our physical body. But what we have to understand is that there's a dynamic transfer state that goes in between. And that transfer state is not just a specific component. Because whatever we are part of that environment. And so we have to transcend the limitations of our physicality and understand that we are part of something else. And we have to interact with that something else. And so when we're looking at the universal cup is interacting with stacker. they're all made of the same components. But the energy transfer is done differently. And we know that because when we go to sleep at night, we break the chains. Our souls can travel monotonically and maintain the connection because we wake up in the morning and come back. And so we understand that there's this light force, and that's different from the physical light or from the gas light. And we understand that there's a physical light and a non-visible light. So the interaction of our physicality and the interaction of our souls acts as one. And when we say what goes around comes around, the interaction of all the souls on this planet interact the same way. That's why the plasma dome works. And that's why you work with it. How can you manifest the field strength? You have to understand that there's a natural creation and a natural decay, and it's a two-way street. And you don't want to leak. You want to be as stable as possible. And so can you do that? Well, the first thing is you have to be aware. You have to be aware that there's more. You have to understand that the origin of the universe can create more. And that whatever you create has an interaction with other fields. And as long as you don't choose which field, you're able to interact with as many as you want. So you really have to be careful of what you wish for. And so now we have an awareness that we can, through our body enhancement, connect our tangible and non-tangible assets. But through the material enhancement, we can connect our non-tangible and tangible assets. And so we find that we are the connection between the source and the destination, and there is no mass confusion. It all revolves around peace. Peace is at the heart of it. And so when we look at the plasmatic energy that's at the heart of the star formation, we find that that's created because we create the pattern. And when we create the pattern, we get the energy. They go together just like the electron-proton combination of the atom. And from there, not only do we create our different transportation mediums, but we understand how the rest of the universe is created and the connection. And so now we understand how we can put the greater oneness together, and we've been trying to do that for 498 Thursdays in a row with the Knowledge Seekers Workshop. We publicly have announced the transcending of the limitations of nuclear science for those who want to listen. And so to better understand this dynamic transfer state, we need to come to some conclusions. How is this maggrav created through this divergence and conversions? And from there, we create this conversion of energy. And does it come through the poles, or does it come through the equator, or does it come through other dimensions? Let's go back to the infinity loop. Yeah, there's a loop, but we're only looking at the one loop, one dimension. And we have to see that there's a convergence to come to that vanishing point, and there's a divergence to leave that vanishing point, but at the same time, there's a convergence coming back and a divergence going from. That's how the infinity loop works. So when you look at the plasmatic residue, we have to understand that that residue is a form artifact of energy and motion, and it's coming from somewhere. That's why you have to add a form. But let's add, because we have two plasma fields. And when they rotate in one direction, then you have this divergence. This is your physical small m matter state friction. So you have another core. And so when you find that these fields are rotating in the same direction, that you have this friction. But if it's just physical, then you have this divergence. But if it's plasmatic, then you have this convergence. A gravitational convergence, isn't it? So you have this eddy core, another field in the infinity loop at this vanishing point. And now you have the second dimension where you have this connection. But it's not in balance, is it? There's no accounting for any flow here, is it? Because you're not taking anything else into account, and you can't make a decision as to what to take into account. We have to create a star formation. Once you create a star formation, you have both. You have the stability of the magrat, and you have the interaction of the field forces. And you have the eddy core, the non-tangible, non-visible. So when we say oxygen, and it's oxygen 8, and when we say hydrogen, we say hydrogen 1. So is oxygen hydrogen 8? Not really, because hydrogen does not have any neutrons. What oxygen does. We really don't know how many neutrons it has. What we do know is the mass. So when we look at the mass, we say that oxygen has a mass of 16, which would be, well, 8 protons, and a mass of 8 neutrons. But all of these protons are connected to an electron. So we know that an electron and a proton are married together, and they don't have a neutron. They're a product of the neutron. And so the electron-proton combination is actually the same as a hydrogen. So that's oxygen. And we have to understand that when we look at the relationship, what we call a right angle, so we can see that we can get a right angle of 90 degrees. But the reason I bring that up is because we're going to make water from oxygen, and we added 2 hydrogens to make the water. But the angle of the 2 hydrogens is greater than 90 degrees. when it's in a crystalline form. But water in a liquid form is a wave, and it keeps moving. And why does it keep moving? Because it's interacting. And so this becomes the fundamental principle of protein building. Why is that? Well, I'm glad you asked that question, because when you produce water, you produce protein. When you produce one, you produce the other. There is no garbage in the universe. And the protein follows the pattern of the amino acid. And the key component of the amino acid is the oxygen-hydrogen relationship. And then you add the carbon and the nitrogen, and you have the amino acid. So this is all part of the star formation structure of the amino acid. And you create both. And so when you look at the daisy and understand that the daisy is a physical manifestation of the protein, is a physical manifestation of the protein, which comes from the amino acid. And we understand that there's water inside. So we have to see that the daisy has different components. And so in fact, it's a physical manifestation of the dynamic daisy within. So the dynamic daisy is a manifestation of its star formation. And so is our soul. And so is your physicality. And it's all part of the dynamic plasma. This is the KAKT Foundation Spaceship Institute teachings on plasma science, calling all knowledge seekers. Make the connection. Life's learning lessons transmute your soul growth. Understand, we're talking about different dimensions, 3 dimensions, and you are not part of any of those 3 dimensions. Because you're the observer. But there's a connection. So it's not that you're not part of those 3 dimensions. It's that those 3 dimensions are part of you. That's how the universe works. The universe works from peace. And what we need on this planet is world peace. We have a world peace treaty. Please sign it. Sign it with a pen, sign it with your heart, and sign it with your soul. And we understand how the plasma fields work. Through the plasma dilution, the dilution of emotion, which allows fields of life choices free from boundaries or abuse. And it's the ethos that maps your position, and the universal community is your travel guide. The speed of love manifests and determines your inner emotional construct. These are the fundamental building blocks of your inner space. And the earthbound soul family is looking for a gravitational transformation of that inner space to restore the physical and emotional vitality, not only of you, but of your soul and yours and the planet and the soul of the planet. Because it's all a manifestation of the emotion of knowledge, which is embodied in the transmutation connection. And this connection connects equally to the universal cosmic rays freedom broadcast. And this is the broadcast of the inner space of the universe community. And so the cup of the universe, if you understand it, resonates with the proper plasma universe. That's why plasma science needs to continue to be delivered in exchange for peace on Earth. So welcome to the new outer space age. That's the end of this lesson, and then thank you very much for going through this review and allowing me to present. Hope you enjoyed the presentation.
Or is it the new inner space age, Alex? We always want to go out, but we don't seem to want to go in.
That's right. You got to get it in before you get it out.
Yeah. Wow. I think you could spend an hour or more or days on each one of those panels you presented. As we know, we can always go deeper and deeper into this knowledge in every aspect, I think. Thank you very much. Just want to remind everyone that there is a testimonial meeting tomorrow, 8 p.m. in the public Zoom room, which is the 939 room. That's at 8 p.m. CET. And that's the second Monday. So if you have a testimonial, if you've received something, please feel free to share it. Rick would be happy to accommodate you. It always makes his job a bit easier. But we do have many testimonials from the Brazilian team, and I'm sure a few others that'll be delivered directly tomorrow. So please come and support if you can. I know the testimonials should be growing. I also noticed, Alex, that Santi was here, and usually when he comes in, he'd like to share something with us. Is he still here? And I know he's very instrumental in building a wellness center down there. Santi, if you're with us, if you're close to your mic, did you happen to see the video that Andreas made? We can try to forward it to you, Mr. Kesh.
Good evening. Hello.
Hello.
Hello. Nice to be with you. Thank you, Alex, for your class. And thank you, Mark, for this workshop. I am working on studies now. These 2 months ago, 2 or 3 months, I'm studying Feng Shui and other disciplines that has to be with the plasma science, and very interesting. The wellness center is being built, but very slowly here in Uruguay. So I'm entertained with other subjects. I saw that video. Yes. I keep with the Spanish team in the workshops.
Mm-hmm.
And well, studying a little bit.
Okay, take the screen back, please, Alex.
It's long ago that I haven't been here with you. More or less 2 or 3 months, I suppose.
Well, we're
No
glad you're
problem.
here.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it doesn't always, as Mr. Kesh said, his dream, he's realized the dream after 40 years of trying to get this taken. So no problem. We have all the existence in the universe, as he said, whether it takes 4 days, 4 weeks, 4 months, 4 years, or 400 years. We're here to serve. So thank you, Santi, for serving, and always feel free to come in and share anything you'd like or be part of this meeting or any other one.
Well, thanks to you. Next few weeks, I'm going to send you the studies I'm doing. They are they are coming back again because I was very occupied with the construction works. So now I'm coming back to the studies of plasma science.
No problem. As we said earlier, there's no bad knowledge. We're open to all knowledge, as Mr. Kesh said, and I'm sure we're going to discover many new knowledges as we start to interact with the universal community and share that. So, and they're going to share with us, we're going to share with them. But as he said, there's no bad knowledge. Saeed had put a question into the chat and another one into the Q&A. And feel free, Santi, if you'd like. Can we elevate the souls of our enemies?
I think yes, of course.
I think yes, too. And of course, Mr. Kesh said we really don't pay a lot of attention to our enemies because they are there to serve us, even though we think they're playing a role as well. So at one point he said, you know, we don't pay attention to them because they're there to serve us. So they're playing a certain role, and what we would consider not good is used to create the good. So yes, we can definitely elevate those who we consider our enemies, even people that poisoned Mr. Kesh. He invited them back to illustrate the next book, if you can believe that.
Huh?
Yeah.
Excellent.
I know.
Excellent.
So anyone who had gotten poisoned by someone and it was documented, how deep do you have to understand this knowledge to even offer them the ability to illustrate the next book? Wow.
Wow. We have to maintain elevated. That's our work. And as we shine, we can deliver light to others. I think that's the way we have to do things. It's very difficult in these times, in these moments of the world, but we have to maintain up very high our energy, our ethos, and go through a straight path. Okay.
Yes, he referenced we're the soldiers of the knowledge. And we're that. They're trying to put this technology back in the bag, as you've heard the expression, put the cat back in the bag. But he said we're the part of that cat that's not back in the bag. Those are the knowledge seekers. So we keep pressing forward. And surely, step by step, what was promised will be delivered. It is being delivered.
Yes.
And now, with the huge backing, I think the potential is obviously unlimited at this point. But we press on, we keep working, and Mr. Kesh is doing his part, and we keep doing our part.
Yes, as he said, this plasma science, we have to study for the next 1,000 years. And thank you, Alex, for your classes, because they inspire us to keep on going and keep studying this and learning from each other. I learn a lot from everyone on the workshops. It's very good to keep on participating in the workshops and bring more people to this table, no? To this play.
No question. No question. There was a question. We were going to play one of the questions, and I just put it into the chat. It's at 1 hour and 40 minutes into the 498 workshop about mathematically calculating a formula to explain the plasma creation process. He said it's an impossibility, but you can try. And of course, the creator would be very pleased because he'd even learn something that he couldn't accomplish as well. But yeah. So again, some people, we talk about wellness, or we talk about people going into the system and doing that. He said one of the things you could achieve by going into the system was a more dedication to the knowledge and trying to understand it. So that's another thing. It's not always fixing the knee or the elbow or the neck or the headaches, the chocolate addiction or whatever. There's many things that are happening, and they're all working together. We're not that far up on the ladder to be able to see the picture, the overall picture, but in the future we will. We'll have that time to see.
Of course, yes.
Can I say something? Thank you, Alex and Mark.
Thank
Hi
you.
there.
And
Hi.
Sandy and everyone that's here and everyone in the
Everybody. Yeah. Yeah, for everybody. Yeah. Can I?
Of course,
Hello?
we have microphone.
Yeah. Okay.
That's the,
Uh,
thank you. We
Thank
seen
you.
you in a little bit. Selena. Thank you, Santi, as well. Feel free to, again, come in more today or anytime you'd like.
Thank you.
Okay. Sorry, I didn't attend few classes in here. I was busy. Busy means learning a lot of stuff, more stuff, other way. So
I thought you were going to say you got a little fed up with the physicality. You decide to explore the universe even more than you have been.
I did. I learned a little bit more. Our main problem is unknowingness. We don't want to learn. One problem, and another problem is we don't have belief in ourselves. In Bangla, we talk like Atmabishwas. Here people say confidence is the really different meaning of the confidence. Atmabishwas. We say
when you say Bangla,
yes,
Bang.
yes, Bengali language, and Hindi is similar. Atma, it means soul, and Bangladesh we say Atmabishwas, and believe is Bishwas. That means here we say confidence. Over there we say believe in your soul, believe in my soul. That is Atmabishwas. And Hindi, those people say Atmabishwas. The same thing. Believe in soul.
Yeah, very interesting. In the West, we always want to go outside. It's almost like a preset thing that the solution has to be outside of us. But Mr. Kesh said in the East, people are more inclined to go inside to find the solution. Right. Mm-hmm.
So problem is not knowing, not want to understand or not want to learn. And another thing is not believe in soul. So a lot of stuff happening in here, happening long time in here. And we are still blind because of our belief system. They're brainwashing us and other system too. So if the problem is so deep, if we don't believe our soul and we don't want to learn, so I don't know how to break the cycle.
Well, it was interesting. Mr. Kesh said that the soul has intentionally blinded us to its existence and its operation, if you can believe that.
Yeah, but
soul itself.
But there is a way to learn and understand. we are multidimensional being. We are not in one place on one matter state. We are going everywhere. Multidimensional. We go to other dimension. So knowingly, unknowingly, we are doing that always, but we don't believe that. That is the main problem. That's why people manipulating us. They're
Yeah,
they're washing our brain
soul.
1,000 way, right?
He said the soul likes to play games, and maybe it's catch me if you can, and then when you can find your soul, then he opens up, or the soul opens, the energy opens up to you. But it's almost like, okay, you got me. All right, we'll work. I'll make myself more apparent.
Yeah. I'm learning the QHHT, and then sometime now I'm seeing the Farsight Institute. I want to know everything, so sometimes I get lost in one thing and then come back and do other things. So I'm learning a lot of stuff. So I learned our physicality. Lot of stuff is happening because of our emotion. The disease come from the emotion. The cancer come from the anger, hidden anger. Sometimes we forgot. Long time happened, but the emotion we kept in ourselves. So emotion, that is energy. And then energy build up little by little. So, and someday, some years later, the disease come because of the energy build up. So the emotion making all kinds of stuff, but we don't want to know what is going on. We always depend on the other. Every solution, everything in ourselves, inside ourselves, but we don't want to know. We don't want to practice. That is the thing. And then we are so lost with those programming. Now we don't have any confidence. We don't have any atmavishwas to believe our soul. We have the solution. We are making everything. And this now we are so lost. That's why the other people who knows little bit before. So those people are manipulating us. Those people are taking our energy. Now only way is to open our eyes, and we have to believe ourselves. We have to believe our soul. We have everything inside us. Outside, nothing. We have to believe. And that situation is so deep. We have to, if we want to get out, we have to believe ourselves. So, and everything, we are multidimensional. We are not physical, only physical. So we go everywhere. We have the solution, but we don't have the atmavishwas. We don't have the soul belief. That is the thing. So, so I'm learning those things and feeling those things. I'm going other places. Everything is so clear, but why don't people want to understand? Everybody, we are always looking outside stuff to help ourselves. No, everything inside us. And
Yeah, that's what we said earlier. Man exists and operates in the universe, and the universe exists and operates within the man. This, I think, was from book 1.
Yeah, we need to see look different way. Everything, the programming is not working. We are going down, so we have to see other way. We have to find the way. We have the way. Just we have to change our belief. Just believe ourselves. Believe in our soul. Yeah, that is all I want to say. Thank you
Right.
both. Thank you
Yeah,
both.
thank you, Selena. Beautiful. Yeah, I know this is what it is. I know in that Mr. Kennedy a couple times in Italy last year, maybe the year before there, he was saying that systematically, even the religious leaders have purposely not allowed us to find our soul as well. That it was somewhere out there. We had to find it somewhere, or it's hiding in a certain place. But this is what he's opening up, this whole understanding. Thank you, Selena, very much. And again, if you do travel, come back sooner, if you'd like,
Thank you.
and share more. Saeed had put another question in. Alex, hello, blessings. Does Mr. Kesh discourage using scalar energy metaphysical products? Is scalar energy part of the plasma fields, or is it different? Thanks. Alex?
Okay. I cannot answer your question with the scientific information, except to emphasize what I've been trying to emphasize all along. How can you differentiate between the plasma reality and the physical reality? And what does it mean? So since the plasma reality always manifests physical reality, so that has precedence. And since the higher energy feeds the weaker strength, then the plasmatic reality is the higher strength. So the individual sciences that you are constantly referring to are sciences that are proved through verification and validation. And this is the essential definition of science. If it can be proven with man-made devices, then it becomes scientifically accepted. And so if we can't have a physical device to prove it, then it doesn't exist. And this is what science has built its foundation on. And of course, the spiritual community has capitalized on that because it's built its foundation on emotion. And so the two are tugging in opposite directions. And what we're trying to do is to bring the two together. So when we're starting to focus on specific points of the physicality or of the science, not only are we saying what we are, but we're ignoring what we're not. And the reason that's so important is because at the moment that you ask your question, you set the boundary. And that becomes the problem. It becomes the limitation. So you aren't what you are what you're not. So when you try and identify what you're not, you can create the boundary around that. And what you're not means what you are is everything else. This is
Made me think of that color example, Alex, you often give, where the blue jeans are not blue.
right. Right. And so when
you would think, shadow of a doubt, is it my lying eyes? I see blue. Don't tell me the blue jeans are not blue.
Well, this is why we're living in a yellow submarine and not a blue submarine, because there's no blue submarine. You know the old joke, if you want a blue submarine, you take the yellow submarine and paint it blue. Well, no, okay, because that's just the surface. And what we're dealing with substance, not superficiality. And this is the thing that is so difficult for people to understand. And I was involved with a health company, and they had food, health food. And that was pushed forward by the husband. And then the wife decided, this is a true story, the wife decided that, you know, to increase the products and to increase the profit of the company, and knowing fairly well that the cosmetic industry was very, very lucrative, she decided to introduce products in the cosmetic line. So you think about it, the health food company with a cosmetic line. So what the health food does is it builds up your physical and emotional stability, whereas the cosmetic line is superficial, and it tries to cover up your physical and emotional shortcomings. And so by business plan, they exposed their lack of understanding of their business plan. And so what's the prime motivation? And so they disclose really that they're involved in that business plan, not for the benefits of the health or the benefits that they can contribute to their customers, but it's all for money. And this is the problem. We're always doing things for the purpose of money. And we have to do that because that's how the whole world is operating at this point in time. And so if we are looking...
At least they were honest about it.
No, they weren't. They were totally ignorant about it. That's the problem, you know? And that's why I say you can't insult the ignorant, you know? If they would just put makeup on it, you know? And it's like, you know, putting lipstick on a pig, you know? It's still a pig. So you have to understand that the difference between substance and superficiality. So, you know, we are fooled so many times, and you know, men are constantly fooled by women, right? Because women are beautiful. But you know, when you look at the horizontal people, you will find that basically women are only beautiful in the human horizontal people. In every other race, the women are dull and drab, and it's the men who are beautiful. You know, look at a peacock. How can you tell the difference between a male and a female peacock? A betta fish. How can you tell the difference between a male and a female betta fish? The males are beautiful. And who is the dominant male? The most beautiful. So, you know, you look at, say, African cichlids, which is a fish, say, in Lake Malawi. All the fish are dull and drab. You can't tell the males and the females apart. But one is absolutely brilliant in color, and that's the dominant male. And what's the purpose? It's to attract the female. And why does the female want to be drab? Because that's a form of protection. If you eliminate that colorful male, one of the other males will suddenly turn color and become very colorful. So you say, well, wait a second. Did he go through, you know, a paint shop? Did someone, you know, just drop a can of paint in the water and splash him and make him colorful? And so you find that the color, although in appearance it's superficial, the color comes from a gravitational core component. This is the important point. If you can understand the difference, then you would formulate the question in a different way. So what we're looking for is for the essence of what life is about and how we interact with the life. We don't have to control the life, because the life that we have was created by the universe. So it is insolent and ignorant for us to turn around and say, we're going to control life. It would be as much as saying, can we elevate the souls of the miscreants? Yes, we can. But can we control their mind? Not without penalty. Because in order for us to do that, we have to diminish our capability. And I'll tell you what, in my opinion, that's not a fair trade. Okay, because if I have to diminish my capability to enhance your capability, you're going to take a back seat. That's just the way it is, okay? Because I'm self-serving. So can I be self-serving at the enhancement of others? Yes, I can. So we provide a pattern. And then it's up to you to accept that pattern. But here's the catch. Here's the catch. Which one decides? The soul of the body or the soul of the man? And if you blink, and the soul of the man decides to speak, he's going to be caught. And at that point is a balancing. And that's not from me, that's from you. That becomes from within you. Your soul and your soul is called the physicality will come to a balancing. And each one is individual. And so the life has lessons to be learned. And if you haven't learned those lessons, then, you know, we go through a review process. And that's what we're doing today. We're reviewing the advanced understanding as presented by me. Okay. But, you know, these lessons are going back almost 3 years. And you say, has nothing changed in the meantime? Oh, yes, lots has changed. First of all, we have become aware of the power of our soul. We have become aware of the earth having a soul. We have become aware of the interaction between our soul and the soul of the earth. Okay, so that would be the soul of the inertia. And by tuning into that, we give what we want to give. We give what we want to create. And when you are in the business of creating, then you're not in the business of creating something else. So you have to ask yourself, what is it that you want to create? And you have to create that and understand that the plasmatic energy is the substructure for the physical energy. So what we do when we go to sleep every night is that we release this plasma energy to formulate the plans and the manifestations that are required for the physical manifestation to materialize. The new science that I cannot teach in these public classes is the science that allows us to transmute physically. And this is a truly new science, because even in the most confidential and most classified documents, there is no discussion of that subject. We haven't gotten that far. We're still in the process of dreaming. And now to realize that the dreaming is not just something that we do at night, but it's something that we do basically 24 hours a day. Our whole life is based on dreaming. It's just that at some point in time we can manifest physically. Now, can we remanifest? Can we dematerialize and materialize in the physical manifestation, which is the transmutation of our totality? And our totality includes all the dimensions. So it includes the dimension of the soul of the man, the dimension of the soul of the body, the dimension of the physicality of the body, and the dimension of the soul of the cells that comprise the body. in conjunction with the soul of the environment, whichever environment that is. So then if you take that totality, you can apply that to any template. So that template can be applied to any template. You understand? So that formula, and it's not a mathematical formula, it's a plasmatic interaction of plasmatic fields, can be applied to any template, whether we could call it the Mars template, or we call it the solar system template, or we can call it the Earth template, or we can call it just, you know, our community template. Whatever you want. If we understand that, and we understand that the common denominator is the peace, because the peace is the courier, and the delivery package is the love. The love is energy and motion, and that's what it has to stem from. So all these others are really just diversions, and so it becomes imperative for us to understand the difference between our plasma reality and our physical reality. And so the whole purpose of these classes is to clearly delineate which is which, so that as you navigate through, you can say, oh, okay, that's physical, that's plasmatic, higher strength feeds the weaker strength. Okay, now I know how it works. So you end up knowing by connection. Thank you for your question. I hope that helped.
Would you like to respond?
I
Okay, anyone else have any thoughts or comments, questions, disagreements? No problem. We'll battle the knowledge. Well, Alex will. It was interesting, Alex. I was hearing an interview. It looked like it was from the early 60s or 70s. Al Bielek, who was one of the two people that jumped off the Eldridge, I guess, when they were trying to transmute it. And they jumped into the ocean, the water. And what he was saying, you know, you mentioned the soul of the planet. And I always thought that was a little bit hokey, you know, that the planet was this living entity, or Gaia, or Mother Earth, and all that. But what he mentioned there was, he said the understanding of the Earth being a rock, or a, you know, this iron in the core and all that. He said that knowledge we give to the universities and the colleges. The more advanced knowledge is knowing that the Earth is a living entity. So again, just a little tidbit I thought I'd add in.
Yeah, and it's a sad thing that you have to add that in. And you know, I was listening to some of the discussions in some of the university forums, and it's actually really sad, because a lot of it is just brainless. They almost seem like they're on remote control. They themselves are. They're not talking from their own conclusions or their own discoveries. You're just basically parroting what all the influencers on the internet are talking about, and they can't transcend the difference. And you know, I came to this point. It was very, very difficult for me to cross this bridge, and the reason for it was because I went to the library, something that very few students do to these days. I went to the library and I looked at all the books, and it wasn't the biggest library. Every library has a different size. So I was in a library that was pretty decent. And I realized that I would have to have multiple years, multiple lifespans, in other words, to read all the books. So I had to somehow decide, which books were worth reading. And, I remember a saying from my dad, sometimes he felt sorry for the tree because the tree gave from its physicality to create a paper and a book. And what a waste. And so, the intention of the tree to be able to create documents that we could read and learn from. And when, stupidity and wrong knowledge is put on those pieces of paper, it's the intention of the tree gone bad. And we were the ones who polluted the water, so to speak. And so now I had a dilemma. How do I differentiate? And I had to learn. And I did. And I found that as I read one book, it led to another, and it led to another. And once I found that path, I couldn't miss. Instead of out of 10 books, maybe reading 8 books that were nonsensical, maybe one book. And then I got to the point where I wouldn't even have to go through a chapter or so until I realized that it was a piece of garbage. And this is a skill. And I was able to pick it up. And this becomes really important today, because when you look at the internet, you can spend forever just browsing the internet now. And a lot of it is useless information. So we have to be discerning. And that's not politically correct. We have to be discriminatory. That's not politically correct. Yeah, of course you have to be discriminatory. But discrimination has nothing to do with superficiality, nothing to do with the color of the skin, nothing to do with the religion, nothing to do with the science. Discrimination has to do with the core principle. And if the core principle is peace, you're there. Wherever you are, you're home. Back to you, Mark.
I want to say something in here right now.
Please go ahead.
Today, few weeks ago, I was listening one interview in the, not interview, some guys, the very educated guy, one of the scientists in here, I won't say his name, is a mad scientist, very famous. He and then other scientists talking in the Facebook, interviewing each other, talking each other, their finding about their new finding and this and that. So I was listening them, and then there was a Iranian scientist too, Mohammed something name. So they're talking, and after almost 2 hours, after listening them, I find out they're talking about the heart and mind connection, the third eye opening, and then India, I think so those people say Kundalini. Totally that knowledge. They're telling those things, oh my gosh, big word, and very educated way, very different way. The simple thing, but they're making very big thing, and they know the quantum computing and this and that. So overall, when I hear their talking, that everything is bogus. So not only here, their lecture, and I always try to listen the higher educated people those classes people, and then the normal people, the spiritual people, all kinds of people, and then I compare, what they're talking. I want to understand, and I have little experience. So I match with those two. So right now I find out always those classes people, whatever they're talking, mostly bogus stuff. The simply one stuff, that is the heart and mind connection, the brain connection, the third eye opening, or the Kundalini, India, people say. Those kinds of stuff they are talking about. And everything related with that. And another thing, we are constantly improving, right? When we learn more, we know more, we do more. So we are adding knowledge. We are experiencing stuff, whatever we have. So gradually we are getting improved, right? So the energy is not staying in one place. Now, whatever we are talking about a few minutes ago, whatever you were describing, the energy is not staying one places, one way. It is improving, developing, or releasing, right? So that way, if you think, you can uh, explain, or you can say this energy hold this stuff. I'm not saying proper way, but you understand, Mark, right? Whatever I am saying. So that way, if we think, if something gradually improving or releasing energy, so we can say that it is the one way. It is the final result. So whatever you were talking a few minutes ago, that's why I told this. That's it. I don't want to talk.
No, but that's exactly right. So you're being discriminatory, but the way you do it and the way I do it is going to be different. But the thing is that you knew right off the bat what was right and what was bogus. And so this becomes very important because following these bogus things is a waste of time. So, in simple terms, all what I learned from the science allowed me to join the KAKT Foundation, and within 5 minutes, I knew that he was talking about superconductors. Within 5 minutes, I knew. Okay. And
Yes.
what I was amazed at was that it was at room temperature. And it didn't take me long to figure that out. Now, that's because I spent a lot of time learning about, this, it was an integral part of my life. I spent 9 years studying this. So anyway, I could spend a lifetime studying it and still not know, but I used that knowledge to look at the KAKT Foundation and find out what's happened. So I've been in the foundation myself only since 2015, and the key component to the whole thing has been consistency. So if there is a theory, if you put forward a theory like the theory of relativity, you only need to disprove a theory once, and then not only is it no longer a theory, but it's bogus. It's over with. It's done. So whether it's string theory, biggity bangity theory, or whatever, it's over. It's gone. Okay, you don't dwell on that, and you don't have to worry about being a skeptic. And the moment you see a skeptic write a book about skepticism, you know it's bogus. Because why would someone waste good money to write a book about nothing? So when we're talking now, we have to stay within our limitations, which is given by our knowledge and our education, and rely on our inherent knowledge, which comes from the knowledge, the emotion of knowledge, which we were born with. So we have to depend on some way to figure something out. And what was shocking for me when I found out about this, and I'm saying over 30 years ago, was that I was able to figure out when someone was lying to me. And it was very embarrassing because my instinct said, oh, I want to call him out for lying. And then I realized that I would be putting them in an embarrassing position. And then, I would come under attack. So I had to pretend that I believed them. And, I've been thinking about all this time. So it's like, why do I have to spend the effort to pretend to believe your lies? So all I need to do is to discern your lies, discriminate, figure out what is truth, what is not truth, and proceed accordingly. And so utilize that to say, well, that's a lie, and you're going down that path. So I don't need to go down that path. And I don't need to follow that path to say, gee, I wonder if that's a lie. And I guess in many ways, we call it going down the rabbit hole. I don't need to go down that rabbit hole. I know it's bogus, okay? But I didn't know because I didn't have the knowledge. I was naive, okay? So in 1969, when John Lennon came to Toronto, I was 18 years old. And, life was wonderful. The future was bright. Everything was great. We were going to have a new space age and everything was going to be wonderful. But, it didn't happen that way. The quality of life has diminished over a period of time. So why is that? So we have to learn. We learn now, the difference. So where are we going? One of the ways to understand that is where you don't want to go. And when you look at all the discussions on the internet and you see what they're talking about, you make a decision. No, 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 no. You go what's left. And then what's left over. And that'll be the path that you need to go. And even down that path, you still need to make choices. So all these skills that we develop along the way help us discern. And did I know that there was a difference between the physical reality and the plasma reality? No. Did I know where the soul was? That was a huge problem. Because everyone thought, oh, the soul is up there somewhere. Where exactly somewhere is that? When we find out that the soul is inside, then what happens? Now we have to have an alignment. Oh, is this what all the shamans are talking about, the alignment? Well, okay. So now we understand that we have to have the soul alignment. Do we know how to do that? No, we don't. Okay, so right off the bat, that's the path you have to go. And that's what we're doing. And now as we go along, we've developed our skills to know which path we're on. We're able to know that it's the correct path. And why? Because everybody has worked so hard to prove that war and terrorism does not work. It brings peace, and it brings agony and everything to this planet that you don't want. Peace is the only thing that brings life to this planet. And so, that's what we need to pursue. And so the question then becomes is why are we not doing that in daily life? And every time you ask that question, and when you get the answer, that guides you. And so that's what we have to rely on at this point in time. And every one of us is becoming more awake, more aware of what matters and what doesn't matter. And what's come to matter is that our life is very important. We have a purpose. We don't necessarily know what the purpose is, but we know that it has a purpose. And that's where you build your foundation on that, and then you will find that you can go in peace, in harmony, self-serving, but the enhancement of others. Yeah, so thank you very much. That's a brilliant answer. So I appreciate your input there. And thank you all for allowing me to continue to present with this. Because I have to stay within, my capabilities. But, Mr. Kesh is moving ahead with the knowledge seekers workshops. And we have to understand what he's talking about. And so what he's talking about is the foundation of our very existence. And we have to understand that our community and our neighbors are part of that existence. And so we have to help them out as much as we can and not leak in that process of doing that. Back to you, Mark. Thank you so much.
Okay, we're past midnight. Anyone else want to add anything else? I'm going to play a small video from Marie. Very interesting. 3 minutes. And then the final disclaimer in the meeting will end. Would anyone like to mention anything? Remember the testimonials meeting tomorrow. One Planet, One Nation, One Race for World Peace on Tuesday. The Reactor Group, 7 a.m. on Wednesday. Knowledge Seekers Workshop. Look in the Telegram just in case the time has been fluctuating slightly as of late. And the One Planet program, again, these are all in the public Zoom room or on YouTube, some of them, I think, or live stream for Rick and the Reactor Group. And you're all invited to attend and be part of them and share, even in the other language communities as well, even if you're not understanding the particular language you're joining, but the soul understands completely what's being transmitted. So anyone else want to bring anything else up? Okay, I'm going to take.
I'm gonna repeat the one
Please.
sentence again.
Mhm.
That is, believe in your soul. Nothing else. Just believe in your soul.
And interesting, I heard someone, an old Apache knowledge they were sharing. They said, Alex, all you have to do is find one white crow to prove that all crows aren't black. Okay. All right. Thank you all again. Have a wonderful rest of your day, evening, morning, wherever you may listen to this, or when you listen to this, perhaps in the future. So thank you all for being a part of this, bringing the change slowly. But again, Mr. Kesh says, get ready to be thrown into the pool of this beautiful technology for all of us, rather than dragging along, he said we've been dragged enough from the Belgium sun on. So thank you all again.